Good morning, everybody. My presentation is entitled Hierarchical Organization of the Cerebral Cortex is Disrupted in Temporal Lobe Epilepsy. And I have nothing to disclose. So to give a general knowledge, epilepsy is a devastating disease that affects 50 million people worldwide. It is one of the most prevalent neurological disorders. Among 30% of patients have drug-resistant seizures. Uncontrolled epilepsy is harmful to the brain and has devastating cognitive, socioeconomic consequences. Temporal lobe epilepsy associated with hippocampal sclerosis is the most common drug-resistant syndrome, and MRI is essential for the in vivo diagnosis of HS. And as you can see here in the two images that I have provided, in the left side of the slide, so we have hippocampal sclerosis on the left hippocampus, as it has been shown with the white arrow that characterized with hippocampal atrophy on the T1 images at the top, and hyperintensity in the T2 images at the bottom. Temporal lobe surgery is the only effective treatment to control seizures with favorable outcome in approximately 70% of the patients. TLE characterized with structural damages at the level of mesiotemporal atrophy and also neocortex, which lead to larger scale network pathology suggestive of system-level disorder. And the current thinking on the basis of neurocognitive network of human brain organization emphasis on the hierarchical organization and iterative dialogue of forward and backward systems. Recently, a new technique called stepwise functional connectivity has recapitulated this idea. Basically, that's a graph theory method relying on a signal coupling of spontaneous bold fluctuations. It complements conventional approaches by detecting direct and indirect associations. The way it works, it calculates the degree of all paths that connects a given voxel to the primary cortex of interest in the exact length of connectivity distance that we call it steps. This technique that has been originally developed in 2012 was a public group in Harvard University. So our objective was to map the interactions of larger scale network in temporal lobe epilepsy, and we hypothesized that information processing is altered along the cortical hierarchy, and that this function is coupled with structural anomalies. So we studied 72 patients with temporal lobe epilepsy that were referred to our hospital. All the patients underwent comprehensive pre-surgical evaluation consisted of video EEG monitoring, MRI with epilepsy protocol, and neuropsychological assessment. We also studied 41 age and gender matched healthy subjects. Our MRI images consist of T1 weighted 1 millimeter images in the epilepsy protocol with 2D epi-resting fMRI. So as a method, first we parcellated, for each subject, we parcellated the brain into 1,020 regions. Then we computed pairwise Pearson correlation to provide the connectivity matrix. We thresholded this connectivity matrix as top 10%, and then we fed it into a stepwise functional connectivity model. The stepwise functional connectivity computed the number of connections that linking our seat, that was unimodal sensory areas in our study, to the rest of the brain at the connection length ranging from 0 to 100 away. So here I'm representing the SFC trajectory map on the surfaces at the top, left for healthy controls, and top right for TLE patients, and we have the number of steps represented in the middle. So the SFC trajectory in the controls transitioned from sensory areas to heteromodal cortices around the step 50 to 60 to reach to the default mode network in step 70, and it stayed there for the end, until the end steps. But in TLE, the connectivity segregated in unimodal sensory areas with limited link to heteromodal regions. As you can see in step 60, if you compare it with healthy controls that they are already in heteromodal cortices, but in TLE, the information is still in sensory areas, and it has a slow convergence to DMN. Then we look at SFC trajectory with relation to EO functional networks in two plots that has been represented at the bottom. So we have SFC degree on y-axis and the steps in the x-axis. In controls, as you can see, the SFC transitions from sensory area represented in blue and vision and purple to the intermediary network of salient frontoparietal to reach to the DMN at the end. But in TLE patients, it stay in sensory areas for a couple of steps if we compare it with the controls. And although it reached to DMN, it is less strong than healthy controls patients. Then we quantify these two plots by calculating the peak of connectivity and area under the curve that has been shown in the very bottom. So we have peak of connectivity at the left and area under the curve at the right with a functional network in the x-axis. The TLE patient represent in the green color and healthy controls in the brown colors. And I'm explaining the result that survived after correction for multiple comparison using FDR. Basically, what we found that TLE patient had lower peak of connectivity in salient here, frontoparietal network and DMN, and higher peak of connectivity in dorsal attention and limbic network. And with regard to area under the curve, the AUC was wider in somatosensory, vision, dorsal attention, and limbic, and narrower in frontoparietal network and also DMN. So the phenomenon of hierarchy is not unique to the function, but also it characterizes the structures. We know both from trace tracking and in vivo imaging that there is a gradient from primary sensory to higher order cortices, with having primary cortices being thinner. Indeed, we observe a gradual increase in cortical thickness around the functional hierarchy in both controls and patient, as it has been shown here in the plot, again representing the patient in the green and healthy controls in the brown. But we found that patients present with marked atrophy in unimodal sensory areas. Basically, we think that the unimodal sensory atrophy would be an underlying cause of a stagnation of the SFC in unimodal sensory areas in SFC trajectory that wouldn't lead the information to go to the DMN. So as a conclusion, temporal lobe epilepsy is associated with disrupted organization of cortical hierarchy with functional segregation of morphologically abnormal unimodal and heteromodal cortices. And we think that these alterations are likely at the basis of multi-system cognitive dysfunction in this condition. So at the end, I would like to thank Dr. Neda and Andra Bernasconi for their wonderful supervisions, and my lab mates and friends, Sukjun, Benya, Ravnor, and Hugh, for their help and support that this work wouldn't be possible without them. And thanks for your attention.